Hi, this is Anil from Learning Lad with a video tutorial on C programming. So in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to use the calloc and free functions in C to allocate and deallocate the memory dynamically. So first we're going to see the syntax of these two functions, and then we're going to see how we can use them in our programs and what these functions actually does. So if you want to use these two functions, then you need to include stdlib, which stands for standard library header file, to your program. Okay, now we're gonna see about the calloc function. The calloc function in C is used to allocate the memory dynamically. And if you don't know about this dynamic memory allocation, please watch my video tutorial on it. The calloc function is gonna allocate the enough number of blocks of specified size from the heap. With calloc, the memories will be initialized to a value of 0, and it returns the address of the first byte of the first block. So if my statements are confusing, don't worry, just stick with me. Okay, first we're gonna see the syntax. So the calloc function is gonna take two parameters. First is the number of items you want to store, which is an integer value, and then the size of each item. For example, if you want to store the mark of 6 subjects, then the number of items is 6, because you want to store the marks of 6 subjects, and the size of each item will be the size required to store the integer value, because mark is an integer value. So this calloc function is gonna return the address of the first byte of the first block allocated, if the request was successfully allocated from the heap, and if it fails to allocate, then it's gonna return a null value. So this free function is used to deallocate the allocated memory. Use as a parameter, we need to pass the memory address returned by this calloc function. When the calloc function successfully allocates the memory in the heap, it's gonna initialize all that memory into a value of 0. So unlike to the malloc function, where the memory wasn't initialized, with calloc the memories will be initialized to a value of 0. So now we're gonna see how we can use this calloc and free functions in our program. So in this tutorial, for the demonstration purpose, we're gonna ask the user to enter the number of subjects, and depending on the input from the user, we're gonna allocate the memory to store the marks of that specified subjects, and then we're gonna retrieve the values. So first we're gonna create a pointer. It's gonna be int star, let me say, as marks. Then we need two variables. One is called length, which will be specified by the user, and a counter value. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna ask the user to enter the number of subjects. Enter the number of subjects. Next we're gonna receive that value using the scanf function, and I'm gonna use %d here, and it's gonna be ampersand length. So now the length variable is gonna contain the number of subjects. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna allocate the memory. So it's gonna be marks equal to calloc, and then the number of items, which is length, entered by the user, and next the size of each item. So each item is of type integer in this case. That's why it's gonna be the size of int. For example, let's say the user enters a value of 5, then this calloc function is gonna allocate 5 into size of int, which is 4 in my system. 5 into 4 equal to 20 bytes in the memory, and this memory will be divided into blocks, small blocks, and each block is of 4 bytes long. So it's gonna be 5 blocks, and each block is of size 4, which is the size of integer in my system. Next we need to cast this one to int. So it's gonna be int star. Okay, next we're gonna check whether the memory was successfully allocated. So that's why I'm gonna use the if statement. If marks equal to null, then we're gonna say unable to allocate the memory. I'm gonna use the put as function, unable to allocate memory. Okay, else if the request was successfully proceeded, or the memory was allocated, then we're gonna store the values in that allocated memory. So that's why I'm gonna use a for loop. For counter equal to 0, counter is less than the length, then counter plus plus. And now I'm going to ask the user to enter the marks of each subject. That's why I'm going to use a printf function here, and I'm going to ask enter the mark of let's say %d subject, and here we're gonna refer our counter variable, and let me add 1 to that counter, because we can't ask enter the mark of 0 subject. We can ask enter the mark of first subject, second subject, third subject, etc, etc. Okay, the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna store the entered mark in our in the memory allocated by this calloc function. So I'm going to use the scanf function, and we're going to receiving an integer value. That's why it's going to be %d, and then it's going to be ampersand, and here we can access this memory allocated by the calloc function. Similarly, we are accessing a array. So here I'm going to write ampersand marks, which is a pointer name, and within the square bracket I need to specify the position. So here it's going to be counter. So, and the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this for loop, and paste it again, and I'm gonna make this one to print the values. So it's gonna be printf, and I'm gonna say %d, and let's add a new line, and here we're gonna refer this one as it is. So it's gonna be marks and the counter. So make a note that we are not using this ampersand here for the printf. Okay, now I'm gonna save this. The next thing that we need to do is we need to free the allocated memory. So that's why I'm gonna use a free function, and as a parameter we need to pass the marks. Okay, let me compile and run. Okay, now it asks enter the number of subjects. So let's say 6 and hit enter. Enter the mark of first subjects. Let me enter 35. Enter the mark of second subject 45, 55, 65, 75, 85. And you can see here all these marks are successfully stored in that allocated memory, and all that values are printed out. So now let me see whether I can draw this. Let's assume that this is the stack allocated by the operating system for the programs to store their local data, and this is a heap. So when we use this calloc function, the memory will be allocated from the heap. So in the example, we enter the number of subjects as 6. That's why the calloc function is going to allocate 6 blocks, and each block is of 4 bytes. That's the size of integer in my system. It's going to allocate 6 blocks in the heap, and each block is of 4 bytes. So each block is of 4 bytes, so it's gonna be 6 blocks, and that's why it's gonna be 6 into 4, which is each block is of 4 bytes, so equal to 24 bytes. So the calloc function is going to allocate 6 blocks each of 4 bytes, and it's going to initialize all these bytes into 0. So all these bytes are initialized to 0, so that every block will contain a value of 0, and then it's gonna return the address of the first byte of the first block, and it's gonna store that address in our pointer marks. So it's gonna create a pointer, and this marks is gonna point to the first byte of the first block. So when we assign the values to these locations, as we were done here, by asking the user to enter the values will be stored here. So the 35 will be stored here, 45 will be here, and similarly 55, 65, 75 and 85 will be stored at the end. So when we free this memory, all these memory locations, and then we just retrieve the values using the for loop here. And once we free this memory using the free function, all these memories, all these blocks will be freed, and they are available for some other programs to use. So this is it, guys. This is about the calloc function and how it works. So thank you, guys. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like my Facebook page at facebook.com/learninglad, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.